Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to HerJourney2Self Podcast. My name is Tamara, and I am your host. I am so excited to have a very special person sitting down and chatting with me today. She is an influencer and creative, Michelle Anna. Hey, girl.
Hey, girl. So nice to be here today.
Thank you for coming and sitting down and talking with me. Your story has definitely inspired me over the years, so it's just an honor to sit and talk with you. First of all, can you believe it's December 1st? I mean, it's January when this season launches, but as we're recording, it's December 1st.
I cannot believe it. And the fact that this is going to come out in January, we're going to be looking like, wait, wasn't it just December 1st?
This year has flown by, but let's go ahead and chit chat. So I have been following your journey for quite a few years now. I'm part of your mentorship community, but for those who aren't familiar with you, can you just give us a brief background? Let us know who you are and what you do.
Yes, of course. Well, my name is Michelle Anna, and I'm so delighted to be here today to just chat. But I am a lifestyle influencer, and I'm also the founder of an organization called The Flourish Effect, which exists for multifaceted creatives to really help them inspire, and just like help them in the area of soul, business, and community, and help them flourish in those areas. I also have a YouTube channel, which is where I kind of originally started with beauty and natural hair and things like that. And just throughout the years, it has evolved, and my life has evolved, and it's been kind of like a beautiful yet painful journey as well, to just allow give God my yes and allow him to kind of create a life for me, and just like be obedient to what he has for me, and just see like the beautiful things he does out of just like the hard spaces. And so yeah, like now I pretty much do this on a full-time basis, and it's something that I don't think 10 years ago I would have ever thought that I would be doing. And it's really fun to be able to leverage my life as kind of like a beacon of hope for people to look at and also be impacted by. So yeah.
So you mentioned that, 10 years ago, you didn't even see yourself doing this. Where was the starting point? Like, how did you get into influencing and being a creative? Was there a glimmer that you saw that like maybe this is something you would want to do, or did you kind of just like fall into it?
It's so funny because when I think about it, like when I'm asked questions like this, I think back to my childhood in a way. And I just simply really remember when I was younger, I would do a lot of like teaching to like my teddy bears and my dolls. And like, I would literally just be like showing them how to do things. And like, even in the times where I remind my mom, like, Mom, you remember when I used to like really have a crowd and an audience? And my mom used to take care of kids too. So like, they used to be my little like, people, whatever. So it doesn't surprise me that now I teach and I coach and I just do those types of things. And I've always been very creative. So like creating content for me is actually just on like a surface level, just like a fun thing to do. And the fact that I can actually build a media company, a business out of it is just, I think, an added bonus to it. But I never thought it would be exactly this. I felt like, yes, my creativity would have something to do with it, but I never thought or could have ever imagined that this would be it. And by this, I mean like literally like influencing with my lifestyle and the things that I genuinely love to do and that I advocate for, including soul care and, just things that I use for my beauty and things like that. So I would say I didn't think it would be exactly this. It kind of like took me by surprise, but I feel like this industry, there are still so many nuances that we're still trying to like figure it out day to day. Like, where do we go from here? Like, what does retirement look like? Like, what does, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that are new, but it's a fun journey to just kind of free fall into.
Yeah, I totally get you with that retirement. I mean, because as an artist, as a performing artist, it's always like, well, I always kind of think of myself as never one who's going to retire. Like Cicely Tyson, she was like, for what? Why should I retire? And she literally worked, she lived her full life and she worked, she performed the entire time. That is so honorable. But yeah, I definitely understand that, like, what does retirement look like, for a creative, because it's kind of like you're not ever going to retire from your creativity. So, it just doesn't really align with my thought process, So that's interesting that you brought that up, because I'm always going to be a creative no matter what, which brings me to the thought of identity. I think I spoke about this last season on the podcast. And this past year, I feel like God has really been working with me on identity and what that truly means. And as an artist, it has been hard for me to separate my artistry from my identity. But I have learned that my artistry is a reflection of my identity, and my identity as a believer comes from God and who he has called me to be. So, I mean, I had no idea I was about to go there, but when you said retirement, yeah, it just like struck a chord in me. I'm never going to retire from who I am and how I am supposed to express myself and show up in this world. So I think that's just a beautiful revelation that I just had in that moment. So thank you for that.
Oh my God, yeah. And I'll add to that because I almost feel like your creations and the things that we do, whether you're on the artistry side or the corporate side or whatever you do, that's a byproduct of who you were already created to be. And so it's almost like a tangible byproduct of what God already like breathed into you. And so it's something that the world gets to see as a result of you being a child of God, which is what our identity is anchored in.
Right. That's amazing. So you mentioned soul, and you have basically coined the term social media influencer, SOUL. Can you talk about that a little bit and what that means?
Yes. So it's funny because I got this like revelation back in 2019, April of 2019. I remember sharing a screenshot of the like notes app, that I had this idea of doing like a 1-day workshop or whatever. And then I remember just sticking with that idea and feeling like God was just developing it with me. And I'm like, okay, is this not the time or whatever? And so finally this year, 2021, was when I first launched the 8-week coaching program for social media influencers. And it pretty much came from this idea of faith and influence. And it's just literally my life's journey put into a duplicatable system for other influencers or creatives that feel led to this kind of like thought leader, impactful or impacting type of platform that they want to create. And it's essentially, a creative or a thought leader or a social media influencer who kind of operates from this place of God identity, who creates a platform or a community or content that is life-changing, that is impactful in a positive way, and leverages their platform to create legacy, which is what we're here for, both monetarily and in people, because we leave legacy in people and within our communities. And so that's what that term kind of came from, because I think that identity is worth far more than titles and labels and saying that this is who we are or that is who we are. I think that there's a lot of babies in Christ that are like, man, I'm not a pastor and I'm not a preacher, but God is showing me and he's revealing to me. And so how do I learn how to just be myself authentically, but also understand that I can actually share the gospel in this way that is not like in the traditional ways that we've seen, within the four walls of the church, which is great. But how do we do that on platforms like Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, right? And so that's kind of like what the whole program is about. And that's what the the term is. And I'm just so grateful like that God trusted me with that, because I think it's so powerful.
So what does your personal soul care look like outside of, your work? How do you make that personal for yourself?
Yeah, no. So, obviously soul care is really important for the social media influencer. And so I think it's important to define what the soul is, and it's your mind, your will, and your emotions. And so when you think about those different areas of your life, you have to think about how you're caring and how you're tending to those areas, and what the maintenance looks like for those areas. And so for me personally, like top is, like, aside from like prayer and presence of God, is journaling for me. And so journaling and devotional time are very, very vital for my life, because I can kind of low-key tell on a day-to-day if like I haven't sat down and just like reflected and digested and kind of just read scripture and like asked God, like, how does this apply to me? Like, what does this mean for me in my world? So soul care for me, like the top most important part for me is spending that time and really allowing myself to have that devotional and journal time intentionally every single day. And if I miss a day, it's cool. I feel it, but I'll just kind of like be like, okay, we really need to get into this.
Yeah. Earlier you mentioned faith and influence, and I think you are a perfect example of someone who effortlessly, well, it seems effortless to me, combine the two. So what does that look like for you, and how does your faith influence your work overall?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's interesting because we talk about balance a lot. And for me, it's really at the core. It's not me balancing it. It's more so me making it the core, right? If you think like of a circle or anything like that, like you think the center of it is the faith part, is the relationship part with God. Because to be honest, like he's the one that gives me the strength to be able to carry this, right? He's the one that gives me the creativity. I mean, hello, like I would want to spend meetings with God because he created like the heaven and the earth, like beautiful people like yourself. Like, oh my God, like I want to know that God. I want to know that type of creation and creativity, right? I'll never be God, right? But like I want to get to know that, right? And so for me, it's really just understanding that my faith for me impacts my influence, and therefore I have to be anchored in that. And so that term faith and influence really is just this like marrying of the worlds, right? Like this thing that gels together and comes together, and there's like a oneness, because who I am is literally what I believe. It surprises people when they meet me in real life, because they're like, you're like actually the same person. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Like what? Like just how we are kikiing and all this, like that is how I am in real life, right? And so yeah, like I maintain it as the very center of my impact, of my work, of my life, of my influence. And I can kind of feel when things start shifting and burnout starts doing its thing, and it's like, okay, wait, let's go back.
I love the way that you put that. It's really setting your foundation. And I think so many people miss this, but it's about relationship. And if you really put it into perspective, just think about the relationships that you have in your life right now. They wouldn't be there if you didn't nurture them, if you didn't spend time with those people, if you didn't call and check up on those people, that relationship would be non-existent. And I think people forget that. They just think that, oh, God is just this thing out there that I, just sometimes say hey to. And it's like, no, you need to be, yes, you need to be in a committed relationship with God. And then you can start to really form that foundation. So, oh yes, that's so beautiful. I love the way that you put that. So I know oftentimes when people talk about faith, fear is often in the next room somewhere. And so many people struggle with the idea of not having enough faith and being overcome with fear. Is that something that you have struggled with, or is that something that you struggle with right now?
Yeah. Oh God, that's so deep. I think that we try to be superhumans sometimes. Like when we, like in the faith world, we try to act like sometimes fear isn't just creeping in the corner of our minds and like trying to tug at our confidence, tug at our self-esteem, tug at our obedience, you know. And it's a real thing. It's a consistent thing that I personally have to die to every single day. You know what I mean? And so I think that, you know, faith, it literally says in the word that faith the size of a mustard seed, like the mustard seeds type of faith, like even at that level, if we trust God with that little, right? God can move mountains. Like God can do things for us and in us and through us. But if we don't at least trust him and have faith in him, and I actually struggled for a while to trust God because of the simple fact that, you know, I prayed big prayers and those things didn't happen. And God didn't answer me in the way that I felt was the best way. But through time and through process and wisdom and maturity, what God revealed to me, it wasn't that he was trying to disappoint me or hurt me or whatever, but rather it was that he knew the best possible option and the best possible outcome in that situation. And so he gave me what I needed, not what I wanted. And that right there will humble you every single time. And I think every time when that comes to mind, I'm like, wow, God, like, thank you. Because honestly, I don't know what would have happened had you answered that prayer or that request in the way that I wanted to. So I have to now have faith that you're doing, you know what you're doing, right? Like you got to know what you're doing because you're God. And so, but fear definitely is one of those things. I actually taught a few weeks ago on fear and this term of like fearlessness. And it's like, it's not even about just the absence of fear, but actually giving fear like that leverage of saying, you know what, I know that you exist here, but like, you're not about to run my life. Like I have to acknowledge you because I am human, but I'm also not going to let you run my life. Like you have to answer to God. Like this is not going to work for me. So I see you, but we're not having this conversation today. Like that's literally what I have to do to kind of overcome any time that I feel fear creeping in, you know what I'm saying? It's a creep. But anytime I feel like fear creeping in, that's what I have to do. And that comes with like emotional health and intelligence and really like getting to know yourself, because that wasn't always my response. Like I would crumble. I would be like, okay, never mind. I don't want to do this. I'm good. But yeah.
Right. I want to hone in on this just a bit more, because there's somebody watching or listening who feels like, well, I have so much faith, but it's not working, as if, you know, God is some genie and that we say this wish and it's supposed to happen. And you touched on, you know, God giving you what you needed and not what you wanted. And even in my own personal life, for so long, I have felt like, well, you know, it's not God, it's me. There's something wrong with me. There's something broken inside of me. And sometimes I feel like in church, they misteach faith so often, because so many of us get stuck in this idea that faith, we're putting our faith in the thing rather than in God. So if something doesn't work out the way that we want it to work out, man, I just don't have enough faith. I don't have enough faith. So what do you say to that person who's struggling with this right now? Because I also think it comes down to belief. Because we have all of these different tools that we can use, so many different vehicles to get us to our destination. But if we do not believe the thing, if we don't actually believe that God can do it, that God can transform us, and that we can actually live out our purpose, then nothing is going to change. So what do we say to that person who's right here in the thick of it right now, who's struggling with faith and with belief?
Yes, man. You know what? Like, I love these types of questions because there really is no right or wrong answer. And so what I share right now, it's not like a one size fits all, right? I'm speaking from experience and from things that, that I have believed, and also thinking back to moments where I thought the breath was going to be taken from me because life just ran all up on me, right? But I think number one is understanding that God knows the end of a thing from the very beginning. And so that means that you're standing right here in the past of what God already saw, right? You're like, he already saw this happening. And so I think for me, I had to lean in that understanding because I couldn't really grasp. I'm like, okay, so if you already saw this, then why did I have to go through this? If you already saw this, then why did I have to? But there's a lot of things that need to be processed and matured in us to handle or to really not mismanage the things that God will give or allow or give us access to. And let me tell you something, there's a substance that is a byproduct of hard and difficult times. I believe one of the fruits of the spirits is patience and long suffering. And so we don't like that. We don't like that side of life. I sure don't. I'll admit it. I sure don't. And so it's understanding that. And then I believe the second would be just checking your heart posture. Are you idolizing the outcome that you will for yourself more than the will of God? Then we got to check our heart, because it's not even about him not being able to do a thing. He can do possibly anything, but then it's also submitting our will to his will and our heart posture, like literally for him to create a clean hands and a pure heart, so that we can, when we come to him, we're asking him to do his will in our lives. And I believe the last one is, or the third one is, just understanding that God is not a transactional God. Like, I don't want a transactional relationship with God. I don't want to know that I can shed a tear and beg God and throw a tantrum and feel like that's a release for me, and then still do the same thing over and over and kind of just use God as this like transactional God. Like, that's not what I want. That's not, it grieves his heart, And so I think it just goes back from what I mentioned. It's just like, check your heart, and are you idolizing this outcome more than the will of God?
Whew. Well, what more is there to say? Really? What more is there to say? That is just so good. And I hope, oh my goodness, I hope that you guys are actually letting these words soak in to your soul. Go back and listen to it, because I think sometimes we're not actively listening. We want an answer, we want encouragement, but we're not actively listening. So the words just hit us like tennis balls, and then they fall off, and then we go about our day. And then we're wondering why, we're still in this slump. Why nothing has changed. We have to be intentional. That has been my word for November, actually. Be intentional about the things that we are trying to create or change, because we actually have to make a decision. We have to make a choice and take action, just sitting here talking with you, it seems like your journey has been a true journey of faith and resiliency. What has been the hardest part of this journey so far for you?
Man, to be honest with you, I would say obedience has been the hardest part, to be honest with you. And I say that because I think sometimes we make obedience this sexy thing. And we think it's just, yes, I'm going to obey God, and it's the easiest thing in the world. And it hasn't been easy, because I know the power in what it looks like when you actually say yes to God. And so once I realized that, it almost like, it keeps me shooketh, if I may say so. Like, literally every time I know that this is the thing I'm supposed to do, and I know God confirmed it, and I'm just like, but I know this is going to have an impact. And I know, because oftentimes, like, half the time, girl, I don't even want to be seen. Like, literally, I'd be like, Lord, can you just hide me? Can you just put a veil over me? I don't want to be seen. Like, this is just awkward. This is a lot. It's very hard to be vulnerable. Like, and to be vulnerable in front of thousands and thousands of people, it's like, what if I get it wrong? Or what if this, or what if that? And what are they going to think? And all this stuff. And so I had to walk through that process of continuously giving God my yes, because that is hard when you know it's outside of your hands. It's above you, literally. Like, you have no control, really. And it's a sweet place to be, but it hasn't always felt that way. It was actually very hard to be obedient. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that, actually. So, obedience. What would be a word or a phrase to describe where you are right now?
Oh, I would say I am freedom. Yeah, I would say, like, there have been just layers of things dropping off of me, narratives that I bought into that have nothing to do with what God intended for my life. Relationships and things that are like, no, you don't. So freedom, because it's this genuine, pure place where I'm just free falling into God's story of my life and me not trying to hold the pen anymore.
So you said you struggled with obedience, but now you feel free. Isn't that just a beautiful picture of your life and your journey? And I think that's why you are so impactful. One, because you can acknowledge the journey, but also you can live in the reward, that you're experiencing right now. I talk a lot about purpose, almost every episode, actually. What does purpose mean for you? What does that look like?
I mean, it's so interesting because if you ask me on another day, it's just probably going to have its own little definition. But I think, honestly, in my own words, purpose is literally like God's blueprint for your life, like God's intention for your life. And that never changes, right? Like, our assignment for a season may change. And I know, like, some of these definitions are definitely interchangeable, because I remember having a conversation with my pastor, and I'm like, what's the difference between purpose, assignment, and calling? Like, this is just too much. And we did a really, like, deep dive into that. But in essence, I feel like purpose is literally like God's blueprint and intention for your life, and he thought it to be so important that he put it in you and no one else. And so it's such a gift. It's a beautiful gift that we get to walk on this earth and have a unique purpose for our lives. Yeah, that's what I would say. There's like there's Bible that we can add to it, but that's what I would say.
Of course, there's so many different ways that you can answer that, and it's personal, for everyone. But I think that it just goes to show that we were uniquely created. We all have so many different gifts and talents and passions, and I really empower people to live in those, because they really are gifts given to us by God, by our Father, to go out and change the world, essentially. So I love your answer. Yes. Michelle, if you could leave the audience with just one nugget of encouragement, or just whatever, you feel led to say, what would it be?
Yeah, so since this episode is coming out in January, right? We're on the heels of starting a new year and leaving 2021, and I would say let God do a new thing in your life. free fall into those things that you felt like you disqualified yourself to do, like you said you weren't capable to do, like you said you weren't enough to do, because nobody didn't say it. And if anybody said it, it falls to the ground because it's not what God said concerning you. So really clothe yourself in that God identity and that God confidence, and let him do a new thing in your world, because it's 2022 and we got to do the work of the Lord. All right. So that's what I would say. Free fall into it. Let God do a new thing.
You just keep saying free fall, and I just love, I love that imagery so much. I don't know what my word, because I always have a word and a phrase for the beginning of the year. I don't know what mine is yet, but I'm just loving free fall so much right now. I think that is amazing. Listen, let everybody know how they can get in contact with you.
Well, you can follow me on all platforms at Love Michelle Anna, and also the Flourish Effect _ or theflourisheffect.com. You can follow me there too. And yeah, today has been such a joy, such a great conversation. I can't wait to hear it back.
I think I interviewed somebody last week and they were like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to watch it. Do you watch the episodes back? And I'm like, well, I edit them, so I have to. But yeah, I was like, no. I said, well, at least listen to you don't have to watch the video, but at least listen to it, because it's so powerful, so impactful. Let go of those limiting beliefs, because I personally, struggle with picking myself apart, especially when I'm editing, a video or whatever. And I think that we need to let that fall off of us, because we are not called to perfection. Okay. We are not called
Period.
To perfection. Period. That's what she said. Okay, yeah. It was such a joy to sit and talk with you, Michelle. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. Guys, soak up this information, these words of encouragement. Remember, we are free falling in 2022, okay? Remember that your testimony is not for yourself, it is for the world. Until next time, peace, love, and light.